Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined our regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. We've been talking for about a year and a half to call this something else, so soon we'll just call it the weekly Man United podcast, which is
That,
creativity on a level that is almost spooky.
I
I
know,
mean,
incredible stuff.
it was it's just genius in its simplicity. But how was your week last week, mate? Busy week
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. 4th of July, so it was on a Thursday, so we had a nice 4 day off. Took the kids to like one of those hotels with the indoor water parks and things like that, and it was not bad. It's not bad once a kid get old enough, you can kind of let them do their thing, and you don't totally have to worry about them drowning. They kind of just entertain themselves.
I don't know that.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, every week, one of these days, Jizzy, this is going to get subpoenaed, and
I know.
we're going to see you on the news. But I told you I was at a pool last week,
Yep.
and of course, I take my shirt off, and everyone looks at me like, "You live in a submarine, by any chance? What fucking suntan?" Oh dear me. Anyway, but yes, a lot going on, my friend. I've been taking a lot of stray bullets from people. Apparently, I'm not the happiest guy in the world. This is me being happy. Right? When you're my age, and more kids in UNICEF, and you're fucking broke, and you're trying to stay sober. Of course, I'm struggling a bit with
This
life.
is as good as it gets, huh?
This is absolutely, if you're not at our age yet with a bunch of kids, enjoy it, because I'm telling you, it's
The highs
you
aren't so high,
know,
the lows are kind of low.
it's every morning you find you're struggling to find a will to live, but other than that, life's great. In all seriousness, any of yours, one of the things I want to say, mate, is I understand everyone has their own feelings about how they should view them, and everyone has their own emotional sentiment
Mhm.
towards them. And for some people, they're still in the honeymoon period. For others, they aren't. For me, I feel they should be judged by the same standards that any other owner should be judged by,
Yeah.
because that's, I think if you have uncompromising principles and values, you have to apply them fairly. I was critical of Ineos a couple of weeks ago over some individual stuff, which I think will continue to happen throughout their tenure, was inevitably no owners are perfect. Um, but pretty much since July 1st, they have been active
Yeah.
in a way
And
that, okay, we still don't have players saying that's fine, but you can see that there's a lot happening right now. They've been quite busy, my friend.
yeah, they really have. And, we kind of theorized a little bit about it back at the start, when things were looking a little suspicious in June and saying, what's the deal with this? Is this because of they don't know what they're doing? Is this actually financial? We the financials for United, which can be evaluated, have come pretty late. And there has been a lot of talk of PSR. And I thought there was an interesting thing that did happen in June when you look across the board for clubs. Nobody was making transfers that weren't about PSR. Nobody. Not a single club was doing it. Chelsea did a whole bunch of moves clearing their PSR, and then they started doing what they do as Chelsea. But beyond that, everything was about balancing the books for clubs. And a good friend of mine did some math on it as well, and looked at it and said, quite honestly, that one offer we made for Gerard Brainthwaite, 43 million, something in that range, right? Was probably all they could actually afford to make in June. That was it. There was nothing else. That was the max. And I think that's probably the case. I mean, we saw after July 1st, Dan Ashworth, they paid for him right at the cusp. And that was because of PSR, right? Newcastle needed a little bit of money. So United essentially made up that shortfall for them, got that done. And now they've been busy. And I think what's interesting about it that may be confusing a lot of people in terms of the strategy at times is that they're not necessarily used to people working, to this club working on a bunch of different things at the same time that aren't like you can do you could work on three different center backs, and it doesn't mean they're actually wanting to sign all three. It could mean they want to sign one, but they don't want to be up shit's creek if they miss on the one like we used to be, and then you end up paying double for the next one or double for the next one, and you're into August, and
Yeah, of
that's how
course.
you make huge mistakes. So it seems like they're doing well, and they've got the right people in place. Obviously, it's going to take time for them to get up to speed. I'm encouraged that they did get Ashworth done actually and in the door, because that was a bit of, to me, a miss, in those first 6 months of having that be publicly a bit messy and everything. But it's improving. It's improving. We still need
Mhm.
somebody in the door, but it doesn't look like we're
Yeah,
virtually there now on a couple of players.
I actually thought to myself when we were recording this podcast in mid-June that if we were still sitting at this point in July without anyone in, I'd be very concerned. But I'm really not. I'm quite
Yeah.
concerned that I'm quite confident that they will get the requisite business done. And what you say is very important because it's very difficult to compare and contrast this year with any previous year. Saying, well, but
Yes.
normally by this stage you'd have done this, done this, done this,
Yes.
because this is such new territory for all the
Yep.
clubs involved. In You saw that bite in January where we had a January that was incomparable to any January we've had
Mm.
more or less since the window began.
Yep.
Then we had a June that looked nothing like any other June
Yep.
because most clubs are waiting. I mean, if Arsenal signed anyone yet, I don't think so. I think they're close in California, aren't they?
City,
Liverpool,
Liverpool.
I don't think Liverpool have done anything yet. City haven't done anything yet. I think City was saying Savio obviously earlier in the window,
Yeah.
but
Correct. Yeah.
outside of that,
Prior. Yeah.
most clubs are, Villa just did what you were saying, the PSR stuff. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really difficult to compare and contrast this season with any other season and say and use it as a barometer and say we should be
Yeah.
doing this, doing this, doing this because we're in such new territory. Um, and even with that, I would rather United have, a very productive July than have one player signed in June and then
Mm-hmm.
three more at the end of August, because that is exactly what we've seen before.
Yep.
Of course, it's important that they have simultaneous deals working at the same time to avoid ever having a Frankie De Jong situation or Jadon Sancho situation happen again, where it also puts pressure on the potential selling club to
Yep.
not be, there's not a lot of players, clubs that can buy these players that United are looking at. If Bayern don't sell De Ligt to United, where else is he going for that type of money?
Yep.
If PSG don't sell Ugarte to United, where else is he going for that type of money? And with Zirkzee and all that. So I think that it's entirely appropriate that United work on other deals. And look, if they were to sign two out of three of Brainthwaite, De Ligt, and Yoro, I think that's a very, very, very good.
That's very good.
Those are
Yeah.
two very, 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 very good signings.
Yes. Yeah. They would. They would be fantastic. I mean, good opportunities in there, good young players, all below 25, which I think is definitely a priority this summer, getting the average age down. All on, well, Brainthwaite up in the air in terms of what that fee will end up being. But in other words, most likely pretty decent deals for the type of talent that they are. And, something
Yeah,
needed.
but
I
we'll
mean, this overhaul.
Brainthwaite because they haven't been able to move Onana on. They haven't been able to
Yeah.
move Dominic Calvert-Lewin on.
Yeah.
Um, I might have been a bit unfair on De Ligt and Ugarte on his previous podcast. I don't watch. I mean, I watch too much football as it is, but I don't spend a lot of time watching, Liga and
Mm-hmm.
Bundesliga.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the response of the fans of the particular club they play for. So if you look at what Bayern fans, 60,000 people want to sign the petition to keep the elect, that gives me encouragement. And I was reading when the French media were talking about Ugarte going to United and some of the fees that were offered, and was reading the PSG fans below it. And a lot of them were saying this is unacceptable. It's way
Yeah.
price is way too low. He's a really good player. Why are we doing this? And I think there was something else you said that I reflected on a bit. Was like, look, United finished eighth last season.
Yep.
Next season, they're not trying to compete with City. That's a couple of years off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, who can United bring in at the top level that are world class players? And other people pointed this out, to be fair, on Twitter as well, that listen to the podcast. It's a fair point. You know, United can't go out and sign a Kylian Mbappe. Can't go out and sign players at that level. They're going to have to sign players. I
Mhm.
think, considering what United are, Ugarte, Delict, and Zirkzee, those are decent signings. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about Zirkzee, so I can't say anything definitive there. But certainly Delict and Ugarte, if they'd have signed for United before they signed for PSG and before they signed for Bayern, I would have been really happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree, and part of it is like, sometimes moves don't always work out fantastically for everybody, especially when you have clubs changing coaches, things like that, like Bayern going through this whole upheaval. To be fair, I think part of the situation was if Thomas Tuchel had ended up staying at Bayern, the lit would still be there. There wouldn't be talk of selling him. That he would want to use him. Became someone he wanted to rely on more as they went on in the season. But with a new manager and new ideas, different things, these kind of things happen. And the same essentially goes for PSG. And PSG are obviously a club I would also put and say it's hard to measure a player by what happens at PSG because it hasn't exactly been stable for a long time. They've been chasing what they're chasing and making bad decisions, and maybe not even always bad decisions, but kind of chaotic decisions, and throwing a lot of money around to do things that haven't quite all worked out. I mean, yeah, so it's a bit messy, but I would agree, and I think the important thing too is that they are players United like. Zirkzee, Ugarte,
Mm.
guys to let they're players United like and that they have been watching. They're players that likely will be coming through a proper recruitment process, and kind of like we've spoken about, it's like what happens off the pitch reflects what's on it. If they're making the right decisions off of it, we probably could trust a little bit more that it's going to end up working out, than the way that things are done. And at some point,
How
you've got to go
helpful?
a little on faith.
Yeah, no, of course. How helpful do you think Van Nistelrooy will be for Brainthwaite?
That's an interesting one. You mean in just in terms of his
Yeah,
knowledge of him?
I mean, it looks like Brainthwaite wants to come to United,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And
Yeah, he
that's,
does.
Cole Palmer is also someone that wants to come from United to United, but I
Yeah.
wish it would happen. But he does. That's true. But when it comes to someone like Brainthwaite, obviously, Van Nistelrooy had him at PSV. He
Yeah.
knows Brainthwaite inside out. He's going to be obviously a major part of United's coaching staff. Once the work permits get approved, same with
Yeah.
Chris Favell and Rennie Hack, of course. Um, so you just wonder, is that a factor in Braunthwaite's thinking that, and also someone that gives United confidence that this is not just Ten Hag's a player Ten Hag wants, it's just someone
Sure.
that Van Nistelrooy wants. Then the little conspiracy theory in my mind clicked was like, someone like Braunthwaite that Van Nistelrooy would want if something happened with Ten Hag. You could
Mm.
see these being also Van Nistelrooy type signings
Yes.
where but that's exactly what should be happening. That's the type of contingencies that should be happening is if we transition from Ten Hag to Van Nistelrooy. Think about that for a second, right? I mean,
Yes.
just let me play with this for a second because I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Mhm.
It would be such an easy appointment if something happened to Ten Hag, right? And you wouldn't have to pay to get him out of a contract. You'd have experience working with the club, experience working with the infrastructure, experience working with the people. And that type of forward thinking has been so lacking at United. Everything is reactionary. Everything. Let's wait till a
Yeah.
crisis happens and then react rather than, hey, we can see that tree and come and we're tied to the tracks. Why don't we get off it? Why don't we do some mitigation and prepare? And I think at this league, you have to do that. You can't always be on defense, reacting. You have to be on the offense. And I think that that is very encouraging that United are bringing people in of that caliber. And
Yeah.
I just wonder how influential it is on someone like Braunthwaite.
Well, yeah, and I think it can be. I think, it can be for a number of reasons. One of the biggest positives I would take on Van Nistelrooy in general, which would be very helpful for Brainthwaite, it would be very helpful for a lot of players, to be fair, is he's almost perfect for the Dutch English link. with all the Dutch, at the club and the coach and everything that's happening, he's almost perfect for it, right? The experience in England, obviously, for United and all those years in a Premier League. Great, practically native level speaker of the language, which does matter. It does help in those communications and getting things across. And the experiences specifically at United and all that. There's so many positives that can come from this for all the English players and obviously Brainthwaite too, having that personal kind of connection as a young player, kind of getting in there and how to utilize him. And I think it does help. And I think that's where it is that continuity is important,
Mm.
right? That continuity matters. Because as it stands, Brainthwaite is going to, it looks like as of today, United are going to make another bid for Brainthwaite, right? They've had two rejected bids now. And we'll see where that goes. Everton, as I have heard it, have been pretty firm in holding on their price now after, I think maybe if the original bid was a bit higher, though United couldn't, it'd be a bit different. They're a bit firm now, but we'll see if United come in with something like 55 million, which I'd heard a long while ago was closer to where they'd really engage. It's a lot of money, and there's a lot of pressure on a player like that if he
So,
comes in
James,
for those kind of fees. And I think Van Nistelrooy could help a lot.
what happened to United of 40 million net to spend this summer?
Yeah, isn't that funny how that goes on, right?
Because it doesn't look like to me they're a football club that has 40 million net to spend. And I said this
No.
3-4 weeks ago that no one really knows what number is true. Because I don't believe that anyone in a position of knowledge would brief something like that
No.
unless there was a specific intent to
Correct.
give the impression that United are not going to go out and spend exorbitant amounts of money. That's what I would do. Instead
Yeah.
of doing the Woodward type thing, we can do things other clubs can't. Okay. I'm happy to put your pants on that. But there's this illusion that there's a United tax. Let me tell you what there is. There's a stupidity tax.
Yes.
Okay. And that applies
Yes.
to you, me, everybody. You go out and you want to overpay for something, you're going to get your pants pulled down. If you don't prepare and you react, you're going to get your pants pulled down.
Yep.
Everything, and people who invest, people who, mitigate risk, people who, have foresight, they don't. That's why rich people have money and poor people don't. Obviously there's other systemic issues, but in general, it's but they understand how to invest in the future so that you're not watering a dead plant, right? Because when you're constantly reacting to stuff, you're always going to overpay. You pay the convenience fee, you pay the desperation fee, all of that. So there's no one turning around and saying, oh, you know what, it's Man United, let's jack a price up 40 million. Oh, it's Liverpool. Well, since it's Liverpool, we'll take 40 million. It's just a stupidity tax. If you're willing to pay it, they'll pull your pants down. But if you're prepared, in any negotiation, James, it's always about what are you willing to walk away. And if you have somebody on the other end of the table that's a lot more desperate than you, then there's only one person walking out of that deal, with that's going to be happy.
Yeah.
So, for United to be working on simultaneous deals, like we said, offers them protection that they'll get one of their main targets. It keeps the price low. It puts pressure on the selling club not to constantly mess around like they did with De Jong and other players. But it also sends a message to clubs that this is the Man United that we had. The laughing stock in the transfer market is gone.
Yep, it does. And the other stupidity tax has been timing, right? Because when United have approached late in the window without options, everybody knows they're going to pay because they have no choice. When you lose 2 games in the first 2 games of Ten Hag's tenure,
correct,
and you go back to Ajax after you looked at Antony 2 months prior and didn't pursue the deal, they know they can ask you for whatever they want and you're going to pay it. And the same for Casemiro and the same for everybody. And that has been, of course, the biggest issue is it's all about options, right? Because these are negotiations and that's having alternatives, that's having other options, that's having the timing as well. That's not, putting the other club in a position where they can hold you to it. And so they're doing all of this now, and it's pretty obvious that it's making a big difference in how they're going to approach things, and it's just better, and it will work in the long run. But I do want to say, I don't think that means you
By the
have
way, I
to
hope you're
try
working on
to.
those timestamps, mate.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I have
Yeah, I'm
thumbs
making
like
a
I
note.
do.
I'm
I'm
making
sitting
notes
there
right here,
RPGs over this every week.
right? I
Oh,
think somehow magically it removes your accent when we put the
well, but
timestamps.
I
You
just think
stop.
people completely underestimate my ADHD and to think that I have the mental and cognitive competence to have
Like
timestamps.
there's a thread, right, of like the exact time we're
I
discussing
mean,
topics. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
mate, honestly, I'm like the fish in there. Oh, you get distracted, do
Yeah.
something stupid, and then 4 hours goes by.
I know.
Um, I yeah. I mean, there's
We
people don't
appreciate you
realize. Like
guys
I'm out
listening,
driving
but look,
sometimes and forget where
yeah,
I am. I'm like, wait,
I
it
know.
doesn't take much. Just the slightest. Oh, where am I again? Fucking, this is what happens when you get to my age, right? I mean, I'm trying to shout at my kids because for doing something wrong, and I have to go through 4 of their names before I finally get it right. James, that responsibility falls on you.
Oh, I got
And
you. I got you.
if immigration catches me working, I could get deported. So it's best if I just leave it. So, let's ask about the probability that these players will come. Let's deal
Yeah.
with Brainthwaite, of course. I have a feeling United will get that Brainthwaite deal done. I think it'll be Brainthwaite, and if United can sell one of their centre backs, which it looks like they want to sell Lindelof, um, I think that you could possibly see Brainthwaite and Delict.
Yeah.
What will be interesting is if PSG were open to a loan option with an option to buy an Ugarte, I think United would jump all over it, and they should jump all
Hmm.
over it. Zirkzee is interesting in the sense that it looks like they have a deal done. Bayern were smart to put a 50% sell-on
Yeah.
clause on him, which United are going to do with Mason Greenwood. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's deal with possibilities. Brainthwaite or high probability is it that United will sign him based on what you know?
Right, right now, I'll give it a 6. I've still felt I've said all along, even when they turned to Delit and others, that I still thought they would get this done in the end, and that there's a deal to be made there. It's not going to be easy, but the fact that they keep bidding, not walking away, I think they haven't necessarily reached their top end value. And I think it'll be close enough. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that this is the case because still as I hear it, Everton are a bit far, are kind of holding to their price. But I still think if that price comes in and they go on the next one at something around 55, that it'll happen. And maybe that's a top end. And so I give that a decent chance. I think the lid is about an 8 out of 10 at this point. I think it's pretty close, not close like the fee is all done or something like that, but a lot of it is in good shape to happen. There's a lot of reasons that this is likely to occur, and it's in further stages in terms of the personal terms, in terms of that shouldn't be an issue, in terms of the fee not being that far off. And I think that because today, which I'm sure we'll touch on, that they have let Mason Greenwood go and they have money
Of
for
course.
that,
Yeah.
they can afford to do both center back signings before they sell another center back. So I don't think it's going to be held up. I think that they're going to need to recoup the money from a Lindelof or a Maguire for elsewhere now, because these two deals are just more
Okay.
advanced. So
Let,
that's where I'd go on that.
let's say they same two. Let's say they
Yep.
same Brainthwaite and Yoro or Delict.
Yep.
So that means one of those is going to start the season as a startup center, as a backup center back.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would imagine if it's Delict, it'll be Brainthwaite.
Yes.
Question is,
Yes.
Brainthwaite want to come and be a backup centre back? But what does that also say to Harry Maguire? To young Kambwala, people like that. If I'm Harry Maguire, I'm looking at that going, they didn't sign these players not to play. I've had a decent season. I have a sense that Maguire is someone that if the right price was offered, United would sell him.
Yeah.
I think part of that is because he's on enormous wages. Part of it is because if you're what is it, Maguire turning 30s, 29, 30, that
Mm-hmm.
age on that type of wages, you really need to be starting. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you can't be sitting at United at 30 like
Yep.
you're 18.
Yep.
Maguire would have to consider that too. Um, but I would imagine that, Lindelof, I could see accepting that situation, but not Maguire.
Yeah, well, that's part of the challenge of it, right? Is that, on the one hand, for Maguire, he could stay another year and then go anywhere he wants, right, on a free,
Mhm.
and sign a good deal, get a good sign-on bonus, all of that kind of stuff. I think they do have the extra year they could trigger even on top of that technically. Um, but that this is a discussion that they're going to need to have, and that they likely are having kind of as of now. The reason I think Brainthwaite helps a bit if they get him in this sense is that because he's capable of playing both sides, the nice part about him is he can partner with anybody. You
Yes.
can put Brainthwaite with anybody and it's going to work. It's going to be a logical partnership. And that helps quite a lot for Ten Hag based on his preferences, and for all of these players to get them more minutes, because you won't have to allow for more rotation, right? Because you won't have such a problem matching things up. Like, well, if Maguire's starting, we don't really have anybody that matches up well with him, because Maguire
Yeah.
would, it gives you a little more flexibility. But I do agree. I think if they could get a good fee for Maguire, they would let him go and keep, Evans maybe and Lindelof for another year, and then, keep getting Kumbuala some minutes on top of those three
Yeah.
that they have.
I think what also might be tempting about Braithwaite is he can fill in at left back.
Yes,
So you may say,
he's
okay,
fast. Yeah.
here's your third choice left back in the event that Shaw and Malacia are continuously injured. So we have an alternative, someone that can play in there, and you'll get plenty of game time between the left back and the centre back position.
Yep.
Um, United did that a bit with Phil Jones, in that they played him at right back, they played him at centre back, they played defensive midfield a little bit. And I think with young centre backs, they prefer to play you in the right back or left back position first, so that it's not as consequential when you're playing in the middle. It's different, because it's a the middle is where you have your players with immense expertise. The wings you can switch about. You can play a right winger on
Yeah.
the left, but it's different. I just wonder if that's an option, because you still have to consider that Malacia will be fit at some point.
Maybe.
Shaw will be fit at some point. So what do you do when they're fit? If you bring in
Hmm.
a starting left back like Kirkes or someone like that, even when Malacia is fit, you can't expect to play. If Kirkes works out, Shaw, it also puts enormous pressure on him. Now, we expect that Shaw will get injured throughout the season. It just, to me, is like it's a difficult situation for United, because if you sign a starting left back,
Yes.
you have to make a decision on Malacia or Shaw. You know, I wonder if United would be interested in loaning Malacia out for a year to get regular
Yeah.
football again, if they can bring in a left back.
But then you
Seems
pretty
like,
much have to sell him afterwards if it works out either way.
or who knows where Shaw is in a year?
Yeah,
Maybe you decide
sure.
that
One of
Malacia,
them. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, of course, because I think for Shaw it's a big season too in terms of his
Yes.
fitness. But it's
Yep.
such a key position, James, that for Ten Hag, the way United attack depends so much on having proper fullbacks.
Hmm.
On the other side, we have Wan-Bissaka, where West Ham are reportedly about to put an offer in for him. I don't know anything about this whatsoever, but I'm reliably informed that he has shown enormous interest in moving back to London.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, Other times, his relationship with Ten Hag has been up and down, as we would expect with any human being and their boss. I don't think Ten Hag has ever completely embraced him.
Yeah.
And I've probably said this numerous times before, so forgive me and my Alzheimer's, but I remember in the first season, Ten Hag had essentially given up on him,
Yeah.
and was looking at right backs early on. For me, Wan-Bissaka, we all know what he's good at, but what he's not good at, it leaves United really short.
Hmm.
And I think you have to have attacking options in your fullback position to be a team that challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you see, I hate to say this, but England remind me so much of United under Ten Hag.
Mm-hmm.
Slow
Yeah.
transitions, predictable, knocking the ball long, knocking the ball wide, hoping somebody does some bit of magic with it. And they're unbalanced in the fullback position. They
Mm-hmm.
put
Yep.
in a right back at left back. It's the same issue. And you're looking
Yep.
at that going, they're trying to find that balance in midfield that United couldn't have, right? Manu
Yep.
comes in, solves problems. But the balance is still not right. It's not right with the fullbacks, and you see a really one-dimensional team that can't get their striker into the game. So this left
Yep.
back position is so important.
Yep. It is, and there's, and like you said, there's a couple of options here. On Wan-Bissaka, as I understand it, there is interest from West Ham, but not an imminent bid from them. They have a preferred player, which interestingly, I believe is somebody that I could have seen as a good option for United, which was Kyle Walker-Peters, because he plays both sides, and that type of player could be a solution. Now, one of the names that's been linked recently, that's actually a really good journalist in Turkey, is Ferdi Kadioglu. He's had a really good Euros, but it's not just the Euros. He's rated really highly in Turkey as well. They've shown interest in some United players at Fenerbahce, and he plays both sides. He's a right-footed left back, but he can play many different positions there. And someone like that could be interesting too, where if you moved Wan-Bissaka on, you brought someone like that in, you don't necessarily create that log jam of fullbacks, in this situation. You could have a backup reliably for both sides in there, and that could be interesting too. But I do think that is a bit of the challenge that you run into, is that if you can get Brainthwaite and he can cover at left back, you also even have Shaw who can cover at left center back when he's fit too.
Yeah.
So that's why a signing like him makes so much sense, and why I think they could pay over the odds a bit is, aside from his profile being a bit unique, they don't have a big, tall, fast center back anymore with Varane departing. That and two-footed as well. I think he's one of the most two-footed players in England, and that gives him that flexibility. Is the flexibility in position? It's almost like buying two players in a sense, and helping do that. And we've seen that with City. I mean, that's somewhat of a modern football thing, anyways. Having these center backs play in fullback positions at times, and it's worked well for quite a few clubs.
I can't see any way you need to bring in two centre backs unless at least another one leaves.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah,
I would say that Lindelof is the most likely out of that.
yeah,
Um, he's got a year left on his contract, just like
yeah,
Wan-Bissaka, and I think obviously United in that situation are not willing to let players run their contracts down. They're going to sell them.
yeah.
So I would still be a bit surprised if Maguire stayed, given the signings United were going to make and how they make all those work, because the Lissandro Martinez position is locked up. As long as he
Mm-hmm.
stays fit, he starts.
Yeah.
So then the question is, who do you partner him with? And the other thing is, United want pace back there. And I don't know how quick the lick is, because again, I don't watch enough for that of German football. But Ten Hag's now in his second Premier League season, James. He's now in a position where he understands what it requires in this league to
Mm-hmm.
be successful. He's not in his first season where he just came and he's still finding his way. He now knows what type of player you need and how you become successful in this league and what you need to be successful in this league. So, um, I'd be,
And so do
yeah,
the people above
I would
him.
love
So
to see those two. I would love to see two of those three signed.
yeah, agreed.
Yoro is a brilliant young player. Exactly the type of player you need to be in for. I still think he'll go to Real Madrid, but the
Yeah,
fact
most
is that
likely.
United are, yeah, but and that's okay. Look, if you're in for
Yeah,
him, you make an acceptable offer, and he says no, no, thanks, want to go to Real Madrid. That's okay.
yeah,
You can't blame them for that. All right, let's move on. Ugarte.
yeah.
So, are Uruguay still in the Copa America?
They are. Then they just knocked out Brazil in the last game,
Yeah, I
so
know
they're
they just.
playing.
Oh yeah, they just
Yeah,
beat Brazil.
yeah.
Unbelievable, by the way, for a country of 4 million people, how they
I
produce that
know.
much talent.
It's a
Marcel
crazy team when you look at it. The type of players they
I
have,
mean,
it's
just
quite incredible.
incredible how
Yeah.
they produce that much talent. We talk about Ugarte, but obviously Palestri's in Uruguay team. But Ugarte, my sense is that United will get that done.
Yeah, it looks pretty good at this point in time. I mean, it was interesting that he's about the only
Yeah, I was
name
going to
by
say like there's
anybody.
no one
There's
else, but
nobody else.
yeah, so they must be pretty confident in getting them.
And they've had some talks, plenty of talks with George Mendes, who he represents, or who represents him, and who also represents Lenny Yoro. So they've had a lot of discussions in there. Um, they've watched him for a long time. There's a lot of reasons for this to happen. There's been talks between everybody, and he fits. He fits what they want. Yeah, it seems like a good opportunity. It's not the type of thing where they're going to pay an enormous fee either, right? They're not asking for 70, 80 million. He's
Mhm.
going to be in that 40 range, 40 to 50 range, or 40 plus add-ons range, the same as Delit is, the same as Yoro is, and a little less than Brainthwaite. So same as Zirkzee. So he fits right in the category of the types of prices that they're looking at.
Mhm.
Fills a need. I mean, look, when you look at the team, um, Amrabat likely departing, but you kind of need to replace him. Even if you don't lose Casemiro, even if Casemiro doesn't go to Saudi, he might still. I'm not saying he won't, but even if he didn't, you still need another six,
100%.
another
You saw how
midfielder in there. You have
important
to.
Amrabat was last couple of games this season.
Yeah. When he
When he was
played well, he
playing,
was good.
yeah,
Yeah.
when he played in his right position, and he had a little bit of continuity. He was played game after game.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to be honest, James, there was a massive contrast between what we were seeing with Casemiro and what we were seeing with Amrabat.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think
Yeah.
Casemiro is at a point now where he had, even if United won the league this season, there'll have to be a recognition on his part to say, can I still consistently play well at this level of football? Maybe
Yes.
he can. Maybe last season was an anomaly. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it takes a lot of faith to keep believing in that, especially when you're
Yeah.
being paid the type of money Casemiro's. And these are the ruthless decisions that any
Yep.
also United have to make. They have to
Yep.
now decide, okay, the in the past you'd have stayed here for another year or two, but now we can't do this anymore.
Yep.
And I think that it's not just about his ability; it's about how committed is he to the football club.
Mm-hmm.
Because he
Yep.
looks like to me someone that doesn't feel loved, that doesn't
Yep.
feel, and that's okay. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but there was definitely a look about Casemiro. His last few games where you sense the heaviness. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
with that Palace game,
Yeah.
and it just the resignation. We've seen this with United teams
Yes.
before,
Yes.
and how deflated he looked. And look, some of it to me, he has to take responsibility for too. I mean, he's
Mm-hmm.
flying into reckless tackles. He's,
Yeah.
the mistake against Arsenal. I don't care if you've never played centre back. There's certain
Yeah.
things that are basic in football. Okay, if you haven't played a position week in week out, there's certain subtleties you don't know from playing there. But he's a defensive midfielder. He knows how
Yeah. He
to
knows what
steer
an
the ship
offside
a
line
little bit.
is.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 So to me, it's like Real Madrid got rid of him for less,
Yeah.
and United are in a position where these are the types of difficult, ruthless decisions they have to
Yep.
make, and
Yep.
I think they would. I think he will go. And Ugarte's young. He's got legs. He's got bite. And
Yeah. He does.
I think for United, it's if you sign a 35 million pound midfielder at his age, it doesn't go right. You can still recover a decent
Yeah. You
amount at the
can.
end of the
Yes.
season. Um, Zirkzee looks like it'll get done, James. I don't see any impediments there. It looks like United have agreed the structure of that deal with Kia Jarabchin, of course, who United
Yep.
will know well from Carlos Tevez. And yeah, and, but they've been able to get him done. Now, here's the thing, Zirkzee. Why isn't he playing for Holland in the Euros? I know he's come off the bench and gets a few minutes here, a few minutes there. Especially when they need goals. I don't know, but I was reading some of the stuff online in Italy about him, and they're quite positive on him.
Yeah. Yeah. They are. And national teams are always tough in terms of how they're selected based on
Yeah,
relationships, things
yeah,
like that as well. And Obviously he didn't play much in the
Hmm.
Dutch league, right? Recently, he's gone from Bayern to Italy. Kind of an interesting path for a player, right? That he's gone on a little bit of an interesting career. But the type of player he is as well, I think it's important to note because he's not going to be your typical number nine like Rasmus Højlund. They're totally different players. I mean, completely different players. And it's interesting. He fits a lot more of the style of an Anthony Martial at striker or Roberto Firmino maybe at striker than he does, one of these other things. And it's, you know, I don't think he's necessarily a player who's going to be overall putting up huge numbers, but I do think based on how he plays, he's going to be a player that helps United get the best out of everybody else that they have. And there's a lot of attacking talents in that team. We've spoken a lot about Marcus Rashford and his position, and Zirkzee would be a player that would certainly help him perform and play, in a role that suits his strengths a little bit more, as it did when
Hmm.
Martial was in there. Really, and that type of false nine, almost striker, really makes a difference. But it also makes a huge difference for Bruno, who likes to be the furthest man forward and get beyond that number nine and get into the box and make those late runs too. And it would also help Garnacho. And I think it would also help Rasmus Højlund, whose greatest strength at this point in time in his career is still, his pace, his speed, his running in the channels. And so I think of him as a bit of an enabler type of signing where he's not going to put up 20 goals next season. It's not going to happen. But if Rashford can then put up 20 and Garnacho can put up 15 and Bruno can get another 10 and he is
Yeah,
helping
no,
to
that's
allow that, it makes a lot of sense. And Ten Hag has played with that type of striker most of
mm,
his managerial career,
yeah.
using Tadic and other players in similar roles. And remember, he wanted Martial to be his guy when he came in, right?
Hmm.
He wanted him to be. And then he wanted Harry Kane to play a similar role. So I think this is fits Ten Hag a bit more, and I think it'll help. And I don't think it excludes Rasmus Højlund from the picture at all because they are quite different. And Højlund is young, flexible, and he has the pace to play wide as well. So I think there's a lot of ways you can fit this all together, and it just gives United more options too.
I also think that someone like Zirkzee will improve Rasmus Højlund.
Yeah,
If you
I
look at
agree.
the hair, I mean, some of his greatest seasons came when he had a legitimate number two that was
Yeah,
pushing for his position. This is just human nature. This
yeah,
is, we're competitive. Especially professional sports or big egos, and they, yes, they support each other, but they're competitive. And so I
yes,
think this also puts pressure on Rasmus Højlund, where it's like, hey, your place isn't guaranteed, kid.
yep,
And he lost his place a little bit towards the back end of the season, and then he came in and started playing well. Right, I mean, he came off the
hmm
bench and scored. Who was that against? Second, it was
Brighton,
Newcastle. I
Brighton
can't
and
remember.
Newcastle, right?
Yeah,
I think he scored in
so
both games. Yeah,
I thought when he came on in the cup final, he did quite well to hold the ball up because there's a lot more to Hoyland's game than just finishing him. He's very good outside
yes,
the box. He's very quick. He's got good feet. I mean, technically outside the box, he's a better player than Holland. Inside the
yep,
box, that's different. But Holland's playing in a team where he gets chance after chance after
yep,
chance after chance. I mean, if Hoyland played for City last season, Hoyland would be sitting on 25 goals easily, in my
yeah,
opinion.
probably. Yeah,
Right? But I think all in all, he had a decent season last season,
yeah,
considering.
agreed,
Especially
agreed.
if you look at over the course of the second half, I think he's done really well. So there's a lot of promise there, but you can't simply have one striker. You know,
Correct.
one of the things that McTominay brings for United is that hate on set pieces, right?
Yeah,
Be it defensive or offensive. I mean, even if you go back to the 4-3 Liverpool game, McTominay's the one that gets the head on the
yeah,
corner to clear it for Ahmad to score. He was brilliant that game. So Zirkzee now gives United something different outside of
yeah,
McTominay with the height on set pieces, and to if you need to change your tactics, you need to do something different. He gives you that height. I mean, Holland's tall too. I
yep,
think it's when you that height. If you've got the technical ability, which Zirkzee does, he's quick, he's got good feet. That is such an advantage because he had this with Haller, he's had this with other players. This is one of the reasons why I wanted Arnautovic. This is one of the reasons why I wanted Veghorst, is that big physical frame up front
Yeah.
is important. I also think that sometimes we tend to label these guys as big target men, but when they can drop deep, like Zirkzee or like Veghorst does, I mean, that was such an important part of
Yes.
Marcus Rashford's
Yes.
success the season before, because they would create the gaps for the wide players to attack. So I think that he will be very, very important. All right, we'll go through a couple of others, and then we'll get to one or two questions before we leave.
Yes. Yes.
Mason Greenwood. Um, what's really interesting about this, James, is every single discussion around Mason Greenwood over the last 2 years has brought enormous controversy. If he stays, enormous controversy. If he's sold, people, oh, the United should sell him and not accept a fee, whatever. United have basically sold Mason Greenwood without any retaliation. I think it was smart to do
Mm-hmm.
it at the end of the Euros, where England are still in the Euros and the focus is there. I'm saying this from a business perspective for United, where you can do this with minimal fuss, minimal focus. Do it before the Euros end, whenever everyone's going to be focused on you. I
Mm-hmm.
respect the fact, and this is obviously a very difficult subject. There'll be people listening to this who will feel very strongly about Mason Greenwood, and with entirely legitimate reasons. Uh,
Yep.
I'm not endorsing character or anything else, but there's going to be people that don't feel that way. But what I would say to the people that don't, who might dismiss this as a trivial issue, is just recognize that not everyone's life experience is the same. And there
Yep.
are people out there that have been deeply traumatized by domestic abuse and what have you, who feel a certain way because their life experience is different. So just empathize with that, because I'm not skilled enough to handle this topic with the care and precision that it needs. But I think if you look at it from a business perspective, United have sold a player they couldn't keep, and
Yep.
they've secured a huge sell on, which is something that United need to do with player sales that they haven't done.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously there's almost nothing you can do that's going to make everybody happy. I mean, that's true in all things, but in this certainly, but I think that United have gone about it now well. Personally, I mean, I would think that they're entitled to the fee. They didn't do the thing that resulted in why Mason Greenwood can't play for United anymore. They didn't do that. They're not the ones who did these actions, right? But they did pay a lot of money over time, for it either way. And I think it's fine for them as a club to say, we need to get what we're supposed to get out of it. Someone else is going to take it. That's their decision. That's their call. That's what they want to do. And it works for all parties to kind of move on from the situation and put it behind them. And yeah, I think they've done a good job of it. And I think that the way that they went about it as well, not making a big fuss about a big decision, a big
Correct. Yeah, we're going to tease this. Oh, stupid
investigation and a
nonsense.
big mess where it was just, well, he's supposed to return for training like everybody else. He's just a player, and then shows up for training, and they've been working on a deal, and say, okay, well, don't train. You're close to a move, and the next day he's gone. That's perfect. I mean, it's just take the controversy away from it. Don't make it into a thing it didn't need to be. Um, and still, I think that the best call that everybody will never have to think about later on is him moving on to somewhere else permanently, and
Another
not
one.
selling into England as well. I think was
Yes,
important.
well, it was impossible. I would
Yeah,
agree
yeah,
that I think that is completely fair. Van de Beek, which looks like he's going to go to Girona for what is a pretty bizarre
four hundred twenty
fee.
thousand
I mean, who comes
pounds
up with this
upfront.
fee, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
United would release Van de Beek for free. I
yeah,
have to say, James, I can't help but feel for him a bit,
yeah.
because it's I don't believe he's as bad as what he's looked over the last couple of years.
Sure.
I don't. I think that there's no way you can play in an Ajax team, play that well, even for one season, 2 seasons, get win leagues, get to European Cup semi final within, and then to get into the final, and then all of a sudden look like you don't belong at a professional football
Yeah.
level. I think there's a number of things people underestimate the psychological impact
Yep.
of, failure, of not meeting expectations and what have you. Uh, it is quite bizarre though that he's been loaned out to clubs like Frankfurt and Everton and can't get a game. It's just
Yep.
bizarre to me. I have to believe that there's some psychological stuff going on there. Maybe I'm wrong. I would hope I am. I would hope evidence proves me completely wrong, but hopefully this moves works for him. One of the things that made me question this just slightly, I was thinking, is that put a placeholder on Miguel Gutierrez or something at Girona? Is there some leverage in that Van de Beek deal? 420 grand is a really odd number, James.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
It
like
is. Yeah.
but when you think about it, it's not inconsequential. Newcastle didn't want to sell Dubravka to Celtic for 2 million; they wanted three.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, these little things mean a lot. And so, but I just wonder. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe there's, you know, a bit of interest in Gutierrez. Now I don't know with obviously City, ownership, what they could really do to prevent that from happening and how that works. But seems like to
Yeah.
me, it's just a weird price tag.
Yeah. Well, it is, and fortunately, well, not that this matters so much, but with the same ruling, right, that we got on Nice, preventing Toribo, they can't make deals in between them, for the next 18 months, something like that, 3 transfer windows. But he has a release clause, so in one sense, there's nothing they can do about it if United wanted to pay the release clause. They've been watching for a long time. There's also the strange wrinkle that Real Madrid have a buyback for like 8 million,
Mm.
and they could always choose to execute that and then sell him. There's nothing against doing that. You can make multiple transfers in a summer as long as they're not being registered and playing for 3 teams. They can do that if they want. Um, there's a couple of ways this could go, and I think that the left back situation, kind of like we discussed prior, is probably just keep an eye on it. You know what I mean?
So
Like
was there anything in the Sergio Regulon links again?
that, I don't know either. I mean, it's another. I would suggest no, but didn't seem like they were so keen to keep him in January. I mean, they kicked him out as soon as they could, as soon as they felt like they could, which turned out to be a mistake. But you would think if they had a lot of interest in him, they would have just kept him anyway, even if they felt like they were having players
Mm.
returning just because they like him. And so it feels odd, that one. It doesn't feel like they were in love with the player. To not even keep him over the next 6 months for not a large amount of money. Just on a risk basis. So I'm not sure on that, but they obviously have a few names: Kirkus, Gutierrez, the Kadioglu, and then maybe Regulon down the list as a backup
Well,
option.
I think what couple of things that were interesting is I don't know if you saw Ten Hag's interview yesterday, um, where he talked about last season not being good enough. He's well aware that what happened last season cannot be repeated. It will not be allowed.
Right.
Even if it looks that we're going in that direction, this will be ended quickly. And he
Yeah.
talked about the fact that he's excited about what new young players will emerge and push for a first team place that
Yeah.
I've done in the last couple of seasons. I also noticed that Luke Shaw, when he was asked about what young player at United really excites him, talked about Harry Amos.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I just wonder if you look at that and go, does it really make sense? I don't know if Amos is ready. I'll be honest. But does it really make sense to bring in Regulon when you have Harry Amos? And
Yeah.
I
Yep.
one thing that can't happen, James, is that United can't start the season with relying on Luke Shaw.
Yeah. Alone for
I mean,
sure.
they can't have the window closed with just Luke Shaw and hoping Malacia gets back. This is a mistake that cannot be repeated. I mean, this is,
Mm-hmm.
like rowing a boat with one oar. Like you just
Yes.
you have to fix this. It has to have
Yep.
balance. It's very important, and that can't be allowed to happen.
And there's no guarantee that Malacia will be back fit, like almost ever. I mean, there are
Such a
genuine
bizarre
doubts
situation, it is.
that it's like his knees just never going to be the same. You know,
It's
having a botched
awful. It's
surgery can do
terrible
that
for
when
that.
it's really terrible. Yeah. And he's young, so it's not like that can't change, but it is extremely unusual. I mean, extremely unusual for an
Mm,
athlete to be out for 14 months with anything. I mean, with practically anything. I mean, he's at the level of like Luke Shaw being out with one of the most extreme injuries you've ever had. And he's
mm,
suffered with that, Luke Shaw, for years. It's a big part of his fitness issues now is still that. And this wasn't that serious, but the surgery, just didn't go right. And then they had to redo it. And you can have issues with scar tissue, things where your body just doesn't fix right. And that is a problem. And so, yeah, they have to sort this out because they cannot go into it with just Luke Shaw and Malasia. They're not sure if he's going to be fit. So, like we said, Brainthwaite would be good. The interesting part about this preseason is there's no fit left backs at the club right now except
mm.
Harry Amas. So he's going to have to play. He's going to have to train in preseason. On the 15th, he should be starting at left back, right? I don't see why not. And that
Yeah.
may be really an opportunity similar that, we'd see, not that there wasn't a plan for him, but Kobe Mainu got a couple of games in last year before getting injured. And you could tell he was going to be ready once he's healthy. And I think this was a good opportunity for him. And I think that's one of the reasons it might come later in the window on that left back thing. Not to say they can't solve it, but give him a couple of games, in the preseason, see how he does. Is he an option in there? Because we should still promote youth.
Yeah.
We still need to do that and have that route for them to make it into the team for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ten Hag. To be fair, if he is ready, we'll give him a chance. And
Yes, yes, it will.
so we will see what happens. There are a couple of quick points before then we'll ask a few questions and we'll split. Chris Vival has signed a short-term contract. I don't know how long is that contract for. Do you know?
But initially they said just 2 windows. Maybe it's just the summer window. I'm not sure, but
But
the initial report said 2 windows.
why would they send a director of recruitment for 2 windows? Well, what
Well,
else do they have in mind?
yeah, it's an interesting one because there's two things that got said originally on the report. One was director of like global talent, right?
Mm,
And I can understand because when you look at some of the things that have happened over the years, United being incapable of signing these young
yeah, of
bargains from
course.
South America, other
Yeah.
places, and Vival has a lot of experience with that, with the Red Bull Group, and finding
Mm,
talents around. You talked about months ago how they were looking at all these players in,
yeah.
was it Croatia or elsewhere?
Yeah.
We're not signing any of them. We don't have the something, like there's some aspect of the club's operations that is lacking in the
Well,
ability to actually
Jim,
sign these players.
when you saw the fantastic article written by Laurie Whitwell, I don't know, it was about a week or two ago, detailing all the players that United scouts had recommended that they didn't act on, some of
Yep.
which just totally unforgivable. I mean,
Yep.
Gonzalez, from Slovenia asking for 1 million or something for Sesko, choose not to do it.
Yeah.
You know, 400 grand for a player, United choose not. I mean, it's the
Yes.
Moises Caicedo thing.
Yep.
They just. Honestly feel like for the Glazers under previous Glazer ownership, they just didn't see any value in making those types of investments. I mean,
Yep.
Mejbri, it's weird they go out and pay 9 million for Mejbri, but the players that they could have, should have signed, they didn't. And I think this is where the football club have to act completely differently
Yes.
because
Yeah.
when United have a really comprehensive scouting department now, very
Yes.
exceptional to be fair.
Yeah.
But in those markets, it's not just about identifying the talent; it's about having the connections to get the talents to sign for
Yes.
you. Because these are
Yes.
very convoluted markets with people where a lot of dark arts goes on. You have to be notified about kids way before. I mean,
Yes.
how can you go out and scout the whole of South America comprehensively? You obviously have contacts in places that will notify you, and then
Yep.
some greenbacks change hands, and then the player comes to you. United, this is a market they have to do much
Yes.
better in. But there's also a market, James, where the multi-club model is really, really important.
Correct. And that's the other factor is his experience in the multi-club model and helping. Then I think potentially that's where in the short term, looking at it from a United perspective, maybe in the long term, his role is more focused on, director of multi-club something, whatever it may be, and becomes a part of Ineos Sport or something. helping to make these pathways and partnerships with other clubs, and that would
And
maybe be why it's a short-term contract.
I would imagine also at that level, Ten Hag has no veto. So when you're
Yeah.
sending players for the under 18 teams, not there, that's an
Yes.
area where Ten Hag has no veto,
Yes.
because
Yep.
that's
Yep.
a whole different department in the football club,
Yeah.
saying who they want at that each group, and that's really where you lay the grassroots for having just a coach.
Yep.
Where okay, we have particular players coming through that
Yep.
are consistent with the values and ideals of the club. I mean, there's a little bit of an interview run about with Dan Ashworth. I think it was right when he went to Newcastle, talking about that system, that it's recursive system where this process
Yep.
provides you players at the very top, and I think that is something that is becoming. We used to think that this just applied to mid-table, low-level clubs, but
Yeah.
now your
Everybody.
academy now is extremely, extremely important. So,
Yep.
um, but yeah, that's interesting with Vivo, and of course, these appointments are waiting for the work permits. So,
Yep.
they will definitely get done.
I
All
need
right, mate.
a
Do you want to take a few questions, come on?
Yeah. Do you have a couple picked out?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
So, uh, question number one. I forgot you need to be able to read. Um, the Vivo we just covered. Okay, this is an interesting question from Niall Healy, because it was asked. My kid was mentioning this morning too, and I'd have said, previously, I'm not sure because we had this issue with De Jong, but would they have made an offer for Yoro if they had no interest in signing for United, if they knew he was going to Real Madrid?
I think it's not so black and white, right? Um, because there's a difference between saying no and having a preference, and there's obviously a huge gradient in there. And I think that the way that they would look in most likelihood, Georgia Mendes has encouraged us to make an offer to push Real Madrid to get the deal done. That's just the most likely outcome. But that's
Is
okay. That
Mendes
doesn't.
Yoro's agent? Yeah.
Yes, yes. But that's okay too. That's not a bad thing. You want to be in this discussion. You want to be there and let the player know we're interested, we want you, we're serious, right? Because if Madrid aren't serious, and they've done this from time to time with players where either sometimes they waffle around and then they don't sign them. And then what happens then. And so I think it's not so much that he has no interest in joining United. I think it's he wants to join Madrid. And if there's a chance to join Madrid, he's going to take the Madrid chance. It's about how serious they are. And by getting this kind of
Yeah.
offer, I think what it takes maybe off the table is it's an interesting play, because you could look at it to say Lille might not say now, well, worst case, we'll sell you for 20 million to Madrid. They might just say, we'd rather just keep you for another year. And if that's what you want to do and wait a year, then fair enough. Rather than
Well, I
sell you for
think they're
20
pushing
million.
him towards accepting the United offer because they want to get
Yeah,
money for him.
exactly. And so now with that big offer being accepted, they can say, look, we're not accepting a cheap deal from Madrid. So they've got to pay up, or if you want to join them, you're going to have to wait a whole year. And so I think it's a situation where it puts pressure on everybody to kind of get there. And the issue with De Jong in the past was that it just kept going on and on forever,
Mm.
and they didn't have alternates, and they spent weeks and weeks and
Did the
weeks
same
and
with
weeks.
Sancho and many others.
Yeah, and so this is fine. They're making bids and offers on other players. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with this. This is a good deal. I think their view is he's open to United. It's how serious the whole Madrid thing is for them. It's essentially forcing Madrid to play their hand fully instead of just sitting around, and we'll get an answer. I think we won't. After this bid, they're going to leave it a few days, maybe a week, and then move on. Because they want to get the lit done. Probably
Yeah,
while the lit is still at the Euros, they're thinking we can see how this goes, and
yeah,
then we'll
I
move on.
agree. I think will push for a quick conclusion on that, because I do think
Yeah,
by the first game next week, preseason, United will want to have at least one
yeah,
or two in the door. Obviously, the
yep,
Euros has delayed that,
yep,
and of course, the Copa America has delayed that. Um, any Michael O'Brien asked any update on Facundo Palestri, what might happen. United, from what I understand, want to sell the kid.
Yeah, same on his side. He would like to depart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just it's at that point, and
Yeah.
he definitely plays a lot better for Uruguay than he plays for United. Part of that is system, of course.
Yep.
And I think for Palestri's at the point where he doesn't want to do more loans. I accept that,
Yep.
and I don't ever see him breaking into United and being a first team player. These are the decisions now that United are making in a way that they weren't
Yep.
making before. So Van de Beek's gone, should have been gone years ago, right?
Yep.
Palestri they'll get rid of. If you look at, I mean, there's still a number of other French players who are going to make decisions on. Mesbury is someone they're going to have to make a decision on.
Yep.
What are they going to do there? I would imagine they will try to loan him out to sell, but Palestri, and then of course there's the massive one in Jadon Sancho.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a little bit of an odd one at this point in time because ideally he goes, but they've actually left the door open still a little bit, in part because there's not that much interest in him. He's on big wages. It's going to be hard to move him. He has a pre-existing relationship with Jason Wilcox, who knows him from the City Academy. Dan Ashworth's big on English players, and may even know him as well for obvious reasons too. But they're not going to force him on Ten Hag without the situation being resolved, right? They're just not. But as I understand it, it's
kind of apologize to Ten Hag and United fans.
How would I feel?
Would you welcome him back, or is there a part of you says I don't? Because there's lots of different opinions on this.
I would, because I mean I don't want to make a comparison, but I will unfortunately make a comparison. He didn't do what Mason Greenwood did. You know what I mean? It's not a similar situation to me. I don't have any moral rejection to Jadon Sancho returning as a person.
Yeah.
If he were to sort things out, it's not a moral issue to me. This is a personal conflict.
Yeah,
it's up to them. You know what I mean? It's like if they sort it out and they're happy to have him, I don't give a shit.
I think I've talked about this before, but there's an account on Twitter called The Upshot, right? Which is really funny, right? It's really interesting. And each week they'll do different, stories, threads on the antics of different players throughout history. Some of them have been some of the greatest players in the world. Some of them have played for United. And you look at the laundry list of insane shit they did, and still salvaged their careers, and we still love them, for some of them for their imperfections.
Yeah.
Sancho done something stupid, but to me, I have no, like you, moral opposition to him coming back. If he apologized to Ten Hag, apologized to the fans, said made a mistake, okay, fine.
Yeah,
I understand everyone has their own opinion on that, but to me, just speaking for personal, we forgive players for far worse once they start scoring goals.
Well, he's got to perform. At the end of the day, that's the crime for him. He's got to perform if he returns. That would be the
and for Sancho, this is, let's say he doesn't go. I mean, he has to sit down with himself and say, this season is my career.
Yeah.
There's a World Cup in 2 years. If he plays really well for next year or two, shows his levels, he can go there. So where he goes next is up to him. Forget about going to a football club. Talking about being a success with his career or a failure. And, so I think, I don't know where he plays because of the style. But, to me, I'm not totally against him staying. All right, one or two other questions and then we'll split. Hey, Phil James. This is from Philip. What's this? Sorry, my eyes are shit. Garney, sorry. Apologies if I've read that wrong. Hey, Phil James, do you have any information on how much Barada is involved in transfers? Seems that the Donny. Well,
officially none, right?
But yeah, I mean, no one's going to tell you that definitively, but
he's sure he knows what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, look, City are not naive, right? I mean, unless you're, surveying him with CIA technology, he's clearly colluding on direction on what decisions. I would say had a lot to do with Ten Hag's contract renewal too.
Wilcox's appointment directly was reported was up to him. So
Was his official start date's the 14th?
4 days or 5 days. Yeah. So very
So
soon now.
he's heavily influencing
Yeah.
how United move forward, and if City already know this, right? I
Yes.
mean,
I don't think it's
so
a problem. I don't think
no,
it's a problem. Yeah.
so I don't see that. Yeah, he'll be heavily involved in it. Okay, just one or two others. So, seen something today about us being interested in another striker like Tony, and just get back. This is from Roll UTFR. Sorry. Just after seeing we still going to go back for Brainthwaite. Once we sell Mason Greenwood with Yoro, Delict, any truth needs rumors. Brantford would sell Ivan Tony. Thomas Frank has said that. Brantford also they spent didn't they did they actually get the Archie Gray deal done? I know they were trying to get
No,
it
he went
done.
to Tottenham in the end, didn't
Oh,
he?
did he go
He
to
went to
Spurs in the end?
Tottenham in the end. Yeah, which was kind of a
Okay,
surprise, but yes,
so yes,
quite a
I
signing for
thought
them. Yeah.
has Brentford not already spent some money?
I'm not sure.
They would sell him.
Yeah.
And obviously he's at the Euros, so anything that happens there wouldn't happen towards till they get back. Um, but I
They bought a
have a
player named
feeling,
Igor Tiago. Was that
yeah,
now? He's a striker. I mean, they 30 million from Brazil. So
okay. So,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I would. Well, if it's spent 30 million on a striker from Brazil, that would say to me that they would sell him. And Tony's a bit like Zirkzee in the sense that he's a big, tall, strong target
Yes.
man. But seems like United are going in a different direction. I think one of the
Yeah.
things with Tony is you would be looking at huge wages. Um,
Yeah.
okay, which personality of Phil we're going to get today? No, this
This was
is
better.
yeah. I've been working on this all week. I've been meditating and everything before I come on. I've been trying to get my balls to drop a bit further so my voice doesn't get so squeaky, And by the way, this is my best John Wayne accent. So you fuckers that are out there berating me, I try to send a text, by voice recognition, and it looks like a fucking Wi-Fi password when it's done. It's just, all right, I'm wrong. Go is the day. So just forgive me, Willie, because I have I go through McDonald's and order a burger and get a plumber. So I don't. Last thing I need is you busting my balls. Uh, and the older you get, the grumpier you get. By the way, as we said earlier, we covered the Ugarte deal. Okay, last one. Um, is it true, James, that you had a profile on Ashley Madison and you're in the documentary that's on that? Oh, sorry, wrong question.
I plead the fifth
uh,
on this. On this.
Deep fake. Oh, okay. Well, these are all pretty much the same. Any truth in the rumors? Ferdio Karaoglu, you covered. Okay. All right. We'll leave it there, folks. First of all,
Yes.
thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast, listening, and for continuing to support the show. Of course, we'll keep recording throughout the summer, and we sincerely appreciate you subscribing to our platforms and for all your feedback. Much appreciated. I hope your mental health and physical health as well, folks. And we look forward to catching up with you next week. Take it easy, James.
Yes. See you later.
See you
Thank
later,
you.
Bye.
Bye.